In the heart of mid-20th century America, roughly spanning the 1940s through the 1960s, traditional weddings were a fascinating blend of resilience, romance, and ritual, shaped by the echoes of war, economic booms, and a society eager to embrace normalcy. Picture this. It's the late 1940s, the dust of World War II has settled, and young couples are rushing to the altar like they've got a train to catch. Because, in many cases, they did. More people tied the knot in 1946 than in any previous year in American history, a veritable explosion of "I dose" that kicked off the baby boom and turned marriage into something akin to a national pastime. It wasn't just about love, it was about rebuilding lives, starting families, and proving that life could go on after the chaos. Weddings back then weren't the extravagant spectacles we see today, with drone footage and hashtag campaigns. No, they were grounded in tradition, often modest affairs that reflected the era's values of patriotism, conformity, and a touch of optimism wrapped in tulle and lace. Of course, if you were hoping for a fairy tale ending without the occasional cardboard cake, well, reality had other plans. Let's start with the planning phase, which in mid-century America was a far cry from today's Pinterest boards and wedding planners charging by the hour. Engagements were typically short, especially in the 1940s, when the uncertainty of war made time feel like a luxury item in short supply. Couples might meet at a USO dance or through a blind date set up by well-meaning aunts, and before you knew it, a proposal was on the table. Often with the groom in his military uniform, kneeling awkwardly on a linoleum kitchen floor. The median age for brides hovered around 20, and grooms weren't much older at about 23, so these were young folks stepping into adulthood with a mix of excitement and naivety. The groom would formally ask the bride's father for her hand, a custom rooted in older notions of property transfer but softened by the era's emphasis on family approval. It was almost quaint, like a scene from a black-and-white movie where the dad puffs on his pipe and nods sagely, though in reality, it could be as nerve-wracking as dodging ration stamps at the grocery store. Invitations set the tone for these events, and in the 1940s, they were often sent via telegram. Quick, cheap, and to the point, much like the engagements themselves. Join us for holy matrimony, stop. Cake to follow, stop. It had a certain efficiency, didn't it? By the 1950s and 1960s, as prosperity returned, engraved invitations became more common, printed on heavy cardstock and mailed out weeks in advance. But don't imagine elaborate save-the-dates. These were straightforward announcements, listing the church, the time, and perhaps a reception at the local VFW hall or the bride's family home. Bridal showers were a staple, hosted by the maid of honor or close friends, where guests brought practical gifts like kitchenware or linens to help the couple set up house. This tradition harked back to Dutch dowry customs, but in America, it evolved into a ladies-only affair with finger sandwiches, tea, and games that involved guessing how many toilet paper squares it took to make a wedding dress. Humorous? Mildly, especially when Aunt Mildred ended up looking like a walking mummy. Bachelor parties, meanwhile, were tamer than today's Vegas blowouts. Think a night out with the boys at a bowling alley or a steak dinner, toasting the groom's last night of freedom without veering into debauchery. Attire was where the era's influences really shone through, blending elegance with practicality in a way that might make modern brides chuckle or envy the simplicity. For brides in the 1940s, wedding dresses were modest and resourceful, often handed down from mothers or sisters due to fabric shortages from the war. Silk was scarce, rationed for parachutes and military needs, so inventive women turned to parachute material itself for gowns, creating ethereal dresses that whispered of adventure. Trains were short or non-existent to save on material, and hemlines grazed the floor without excess. Necklines favored the sweetheart style, a gentle curve that highlighted femininity without being overt, and sleeves puffed out slightly, echoing the structured shoulders of wartime fashion. Veils were common, often shoulder-length or fingertip, pinned to hairstyles like pin curls or soft waves that skimmed the shoulders. Glamorous yet achievable at home with a few bobby pins and a prayer. Makeup was understated but bold in spots, arched eyebrows framed the eyes, and red lipstick was a must, not just for the ceremony but as a morale booster. Brides would even kiss letters to their soldier fiancés, leaving crimson imprints as tokens of love. Grooms, particularly in the 1940s, frequently wore their military uniforms, which added a layer of patriotism to the proceedings. It wasn't always a choice. If the wedding happened during leave, that's what was available, and it symbolized duty and honor. By the 1950s, as civilian life resumed, suits became the norm. Dark wool or tuxedos for formal affairs, with boutonnieres matching the bride's bouquet. Bridesmaids dressed in coordinated outfits, often pastels like pink or blue, with full skirts and fitted bodices that mirrored the new look silhouette popularized by Christian Dior post-war. No mismatched dresses here. Uniformity was key, reflecting the era's love of conformity. And let's not forget the accessories. Pillbox hats perched jauntily on heads, pearl necklaces for a touch of class, and headbands adorned with flowers for that subtle pop. Embellishments were minimal. No Swarovski crystals or sequins, because frugality lingered from the Depression and war years. It was almost as if the outfits whispered, "We're celebrating, but let's not get carried away. There's a mortgage to think about." The ceremony itself was typically held in a church, a tradition that gained prominence in the 19th century but solidified in the mid-20th as a public declaration of faith and commitment. Protestant, Catholic, or Jewish services predominated, depending on the couple's background, with the officiant guiding the vows that promised to love, honor, and obey, though by the 1960s, some forward-thinking brides were quietly dropping the obey part amid whispers of feminism. The bridal procession was a highlight, the father walking the bride down the aisle, giving her away in a ritual that symbolized transfer of responsibility, though it originated from less romantic ideas of ownership. Bridesmaids and groomsmen flanked the couple, a custom from ancient times meant to ward off evil spirits or, in some lore, to confuse kidnappers. Practical, if a bit paranoid. Rings were exchanged, simple gold bands symbolizing eternity, and the kiss sealed the deal, a moment drawn from Roman contracts where agreements were sealed with a smooch. Guests might toss rice or wheat for fertility, though by mid-century, birdseed was gaining traction to avoid slippery church steps. Safety first, even in romance. Receptions followed, often intimate and held in community halls, hotels, or family homes, especially in the 1940s when resources were tight. Brunch receptions were popular to save on costs, with daylight affairs featuring punch, finger foods, and perhaps a modest spread of sandwiches and salads. Live music from big bands or a piano player added swing, with couples dancing the foxtrot or waltz under paper streamers. DIY decorations were the norm, crafted by the bride's family to stretch the budget. The wedding cake was a centerpiece, multi-tiered if possible, but during wartime, sugar rations meant some were cardboard displays with a real top layer for cutting. The bride and groom would share the first slice, a fertility symbol, and superstition warned the bride against baking her own cake lest she lose her husband's affection. Better safe than sorry, right? Toasts came from the best man and maid of honor, heartfelt words about love and future happiness, often laced with gentle ribbing about the groom's dancing skills or the bride's cooking. As the 1950s rolled in, receptions grew more elaborate with post-war prosperity. The nuclear family ideal fueled consumer culture, and weddings became showcases of middle-class aspiration. Cakes got fancier, decorations more polished, and honeymoons. Oh, the honeymoons became a must. Couples escaped to Niagara Falls or the Poconos for a week of bliss, the term itself from ancient mead-drinking rituals under the moon. The groom carried the bride over the threshold upon return, a luck-bringing custom with roots in avoiding evil spirits, or more humorously, ensuring she didn't trip and omen bad luck. Gifts were practical: toasters, china sets, silverware, all to furnish the new suburban home where the wife would decorate and the husband provide. It was a scripted life, but one that offered stability after turbulent times. Socially, these weddings reinforced gender roles. Women as homemakers, men as breadwinners, with marriage as the pinnacle of achievement. Ethnic traditions blended in. Italian-American couples might include a tarantella dance, Jewish ones a ora, but the mainstream was Anglo-inspired, with white dresses symbolizing purity, a trend Queen Victoria popularized but America embraced fully by the 1930s. Something old, new, borrowed. Blue was recited like a mantra, each item carrying superstition. Old for continuity, new for optimism. borrowed for happiness, blue for fidelity, and a sixpence for wealth. The bouquet toss predicted the next bride, the garter toss the next groom. Playful games with ancient origins improving consummation. And while divorce rates began creeping up in the 1960s, weddings remained optimistic affairs, ignoring such shadows. By the 1960s, hints of change emerged. Outdoor ceremonies for the free-spirited, relaxed gowns with shorter hems reflecting mod fashion, and vows personalized amid civil rights and counterculture stirrings. But traditional elements held strong. Church bells, rice showers, cake smashes. These weddings weren't just unions. They were cultural anchors in a changing world, blending solemnity with subtle joy. Imagine the bride's red lips curving into a smile as she cuts the cake, the groom's uniform crisp against the altar. Moments of humanity in history's grand narrative. And if a telegram got lost in the mail? Well, that's just another story for the grandkids, told with a wink and a nod to how love persevered, one modest gown at a time. Delving deeper into the 1940s specifically, the war's shadow loomed large, turning weddings into acts of defiance against uncertainty. With 1.8 million marriages in 1942 alone, up 83% from a decade earlier. Couples married hastily, often with strangers as witnesses if family couldn't attend. Brides in nursing uniforms exchanged vows with soldiers, receptions limited to whatever rations allowed. It was romantic in a gritty way, like a film noir love story where the hero ships out the next day. Post-war, the 1950s brought relief. Fuller skirts on dresses, longer trains symbolizing abundance, and receptions with gourmet touches like shrimp cocktail, thanks to booming industries. Magazines like Bride's Magazine, launched in 1934 but exploding in popularity, dictated trends, while movies like Father of the Bride, 1950, with Spencer Tracy fretting over costs, captured the middle-class angst and aspiration. Customs evolved too. The first dance, often to crooners like Frank Sinatra, became sentimental. Photo booths or hired photographers captured posed family portraits, stiff but treasured. Honeymoons shifted from train rides to car trips in shiny new Fords, heading to lakeside cabins. Socially, weddings signaled status. Inviting the boss or neighbors showed upward mobility. Yet, humor lurked in the details. Grooms fumbling rings, brides dodging rice pelts, or the occasional uncle overindulging in punch. It was almost serious, this business of matrimony, but with enough levity to remind everyone that life, like love, had its absurdities. Expanding on attire variations, regional differences added flavor. In the South, weddings might include mint juleps at receptions. In the Midwest, potluck elements persisted. Immigrant communities wove in old-world touches. Polish brides with babka cakes, Mexican-American ones with lasso ceremonies. But the core remained, white for brides, firmly established by the 1930s, veils for modesty, and rings for eternity. Accessories like gloves, elbow length for formality, faded by the 1960s as styles loosened. Ceremonies in Catholic churches involved full masses, Protestant ones shorter sermons on commitment. Jewish weddings under chuppas emphasized community. Vows were standard, but by the 60s, some couples added personal lines, foreshadowing modern customization. Receptions in the 50s often featured buffets with Jell-O salads, a culinary quirk of the era, and toasts invoking prosperity. Cake toppers depicted couples in idealized poses, sometimes military-themed. Departures involved tying cans to cars, a noisy send-off rooted in warding off spirits. Socially, these events reinforced post-war ideals, family-centric, consumer-driven. The wedding industry boomed, from De Beers' "A Diamond is Forever" campaign pushing engagement rings to department stores selling ready-made gowns. In essence, mid-20th century American weddings were mirrors of their time, resilient in war, celebratory in peace, traditional yet adapting. They weren't perfect, budgets strained, roles rigid, but they captured hope, with a dash of humor in the mishaps, proving love endures, one vow at a time.